Sometimes the most dangerous missions aren't the ones you train for. They're the ones that find you when you least expect them, in places that should be safe, with people who should be strangers. Commander Jake Sullivan had led his SEAL team through the darkest corners of the world, but nothing prepared him for the moment he would see a simple tattoo that would unravel everything he thought he knew about loyalty, betrayal, and the woman who had vanished from his life 15 years ago. The scar on his chest still ached when it rained, a permanent reminder of the bullet that nearly killed him in Kandahar. But the scar on his heart? That one never healed. Not since Sarah disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only questions and an engagement ring on his kitchen table. Now, standing in a refugee camp in Syria, staring at a woman whose face he couldn't see but whose tattoo he'd recognize anywhere, Jake realized that some ghosts refuse to stay buried. What happens when the person you've mourned for over a decade turns out to be very much alive? And what happens when you discover they've been living a life so dangerous, so secret, that your own classified missions pale in comparison? This is the story of recognition, of love that transcends time and betrayal, and of two people whose paths crossed again in the most unlikely place on earth. It's about discovering that sometimes the person you're looking for has been looking for you too, but from the shadows of a world so dark that stepping into the light could mean death for both of you. The tattoo was small, delicate even. A compass rose with coordinates that pointed to a moment in time when two young people promised each other forever. Jake had memorized those numbers 15 years ago, had them carved into his memory like scripture. Now, seeing them again on the arm of a woman distributing medical supplies to war refugees, he felt his world shift on its axis. Who is she? The question that would drive him to risk everything he'd built, everything he'd become, for a chance to find out if the woman he'd loved and lost was real, or if he was chasing ghosts in the desert sun. The Syrian sun beat down mercilessly on the refugee camp, creating waves of heat that distorted everything beyond 50 meters. Commander Jake Sullivan adjusted his tactical sunglasses and wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his gloved hand. His SEAL team was conducting a routine security assessment for humanitarian operations, something that should have been straightforward. Nothing about this mission suggested it would change his life forever. The camp stretched endlessly in all directions, a temporary city of canvas and desperation housing over 30,000 displaced people. Children played between the tents with makeshift toys while their parents waited in long lines for food distribution. The air smelled of dust, cooking fires, and human suffering. Jake had seen similar scenes across 3 continents during his 15 years of service, but somehow this one felt different. Alpha Team, report status, Jake spoke into his radio, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the oppressive heat. All clear on the western perimeter, Commander, came the response from Sergeant Martinez. No unusual activity detected. Jake nodded to himself and continued his patrol through the main thoroughfare of the camp. His team was spread out in a standard reconnaissance pattern, gathering intelligence on potential security threats while maintaining a low profile. The last thing anyone wanted was to alarm the refugees or interfere with the humanitarian efforts. As he rounded a corner near the medical tent, Jake's attention was caught by a commotion near the supply distribution area. A small crowd had gathered around what appeared to be a heated discussion between 2 aid workers and a camp administrator. The conversation was in Arabic, rapid and intense, with gestures indicating some kind of disagreement about medical supplies. Jake approached cautiously, his training keeping him alert to potential escalation. His Arabic was decent enough to catch fragments of the conversation. Something about missing medication and accusations of theft. These kinds of disputes were common in refugee camps, where resources were scarce and tensions ran high. That's when he saw her. A woman in typical humanitarian worker attire, a light blue vest over khaki clothing, was kneeling beside a group of children near the medical tent. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore the kind of worn clothing that spoke of someone who had been in the field for months rather than weeks. She was bandaging a young boy's scraped knee, speaking to him in gentle Arabic while his mother watched anxiously. Something about her posture struck Jake as familiar, but it wasn't until she reached into her supply bag that his world stopped moving. The sleeve of her shirt rode up as she stretched, revealing her left forearm. There, in simple black ink, was a compass rose tattoo with coordinates underneath. The numbers were small, precise, and instantly recognizable to Jake because he had the same coordinates memorized down to the last digit. 41.8781 degrees north, 87.6298 degrees west, Lincoln Park Zoo, Chicago. The exact spot where he had proposed to Sarah Mitchell 15 years ago on a perfect September afternoon when the autumn leaves were just beginning to turn and she had laughed before saying yes, then immediately started crying happy tears that ruined her mascara. Jake's hand instinctively moved to his chest, where beneath his tactical vest, a chain held the engagement ring she had left behind. For 15 years, he had carried it everywhere, unable to throw it away but unable to understand why she had disappeared without explanation. The woman finished bandaging the child and stood up, but her face remained turned away from Jake. She handed the boy a small toy from her bag, something that looked like it had been handmade, and ruffled his hair before sending him back to his mother. The simple gesture of kindness was so characteristic of Sarah that Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. "Commander, you copy?" The voice in his earpiece snapped him back to reality. "Copy, Martinez." "Continue patrol pattern," Jake responded automatically, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. The woman was moving away now, heading toward the far end of the camp with her medical supplies. Jake found himself following at a distance, using his training to remain unobtrusive while keeping her in sight. Every step she took seemed familiar, every gesture an echo of memories he had tried for years to suppress. Sarah had been a medical student when they met at Northwestern University. She was passionate about humanitarian work, always talking about joining Doctors Without Borders after graduation. Jake had been finishing his final year in the Navy ROTC program, already accepted into SEAL training. They had planned a future together that included deployments and field work, understanding that their careers would keep them apart for months at a time. But she had vanished 3 weeks before his graduation, leaving only a note that said she couldn't marry him, that she needed to disappear for reasons she couldn't explain. No forwarding address, no contact information, and, when he tried to find her, it was as if Sarah Mitchell had never existed. Her university records were sealed, her apartment cleared out, even her family claimed not to know where she had gone. Jake had spent the first 5 years of his military career using every resource available to search for her. Military intelligence, private investigators, even favors from CIA contacts. Nothing. Sarah Mitchell had vanished as completely as if she had never been born. Now, watching this woman distribute medical supplies to refugee children in a camp in Syria, Jake felt the old wound rip open with fresh intensity. The tattoo could be a coincidence. The coordinates could mean something different to this woman. But the way she moved, the gentle precision of her medical work, the way she unconsciously tucked a strand of hair behind her left ear when she was concentrating, these were details that belonged to only one person. The woman stopped at a tent where an elderly man was sitting outside, coughing badly. She knelt beside him and began examining his throat and chest, her movements quick and professional. Jake edged closer, using a supply truck as cover while he observed her work. She spoke to the man in fluent Arabic, then switched to what sounded like Kurdish when his wife approached. Her voice was different somehow, more controlled than he remembered, but there was something underneath it that made Jake's heart pound. She was checking the man's pulse when she suddenly went very still. Jake realized his shadow had fallen across her workspace. Without turning around, she spoke in perfect English with an American accent that hit Jake like a physical blow. Military personnel shouldn't be conducting surveillance on humanitarian workers without proper authorization. Her voice was calm, professional, but Jake could hear the tension underneath it. She knew she was being watched, had probably been aware of his presence for several minutes. That level of situational awareness wasn't something most medical volunteers possessed. "I'm conducting a routine security assessment," Jake replied, keeping his own voice neutral. "Making sure aid operations aren't being compromised." The woman finished taking the man's pulse and gave him what looked like antibiotics from her bag. She spoke briefly to his wife in Arabic, giving instructions about dosage and timing, then slowly began to pack up her supplies. "Security assessments don't typically involve following individual workers for 20 minutes, she said without turning around. "That's called stalking in most jurisdictions." Jake felt his pulse quicken. The sharp wit, the way she could cut through pretense with a single sentence, it was all achingly familiar. Maybe we could discuss this privately, Jake said. Away from the civilians. The woman went very still again. For a long moment, the only sounds were the distant voices of children playing and the shuffle of feet on dusty ground. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I think you have me confused with someone else, Commander. She knew his rank. Jake's blood ran cold as he realized she had identified him without seeing his insignia clearly. That meant she either had extensive military training herself, or she knew exactly who he was. Turn around, Jake said quietly. I don't think that's a good idea. Turn around, Sarah. The name hung in the air between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. For several heartbeats, nothing moved except the heat waves rising from the desert floor. Then, slowly, the woman began to turn. Jake had imagined this moment thousands of times over the past 15 years. In his fantasies, Sarah was exactly as he remembered her, 22 years old with bright eyes and an easy smile, the way she looked in the photograph he kept hidden in his gear bag. The woman who faced him now was recognizably Sarah, but changed in ways that spoke of hard years and harder choices. Her face was leaner, more angular, with fine lines around her eyes that came from squinting into foreign suns. There was a small scar above her left eyebrow that hadn't been there before, and her hair was shorter, more practical. But it was her eyes that shocked him most. They were the same warm brown he remembered, but now they held a wariness, a calculation that belonged to someone who had seen too much and trusted too little. Hello, Jake, she said simply. The sound of his name and her voice hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, Jake couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at the woman he had mourned for 15 years. You're supposed to be dead, he finally managed. Officially, I am. Sarah, what the hell happened to you? Where have you been? Do you know what you did to me? She glanced around the camp, noting the positions of his team members with professional efficiency. Not here. Too exposed. Then, where? There's a supply depot about 2 clicks northeast of here. Abandoned warehouse. Meet me there at 2200 hours. She shouldered her medical bag and prepared to leave. Come alone, Jake. If I see any of your team, I disappear again and this time you'll never find me. I'm not letting you walk away again. Sarah stopped and looked back at him, and, for just a moment, he saw a flash of the woman he had loved. Pain, regret, and something that might have been longing crossed her features before the professional mask slammed back into place. You don't have a choice, she said. You never did. With that, she melted into the crowd of refugees and aid workers, disappearing as efficiently as she had 15 years ago. Jake stood alone in the dust and heat, his hand unconsciously moving to the ring hanging around his neck, while his mind tried to process what had just happened. Sarah Mitchell was alive. She was here, in Syria, working under what was obviously an assumed identity. She had recognized him immediately, which meant she had been watching him before he spotted her. And the way she carried herself, the situational awareness, the professional manner in which she had handled their confrontation, none of that belonged to the medical student he had known. Jake activated his radio. Alpha Team, this is Commander. Maintain current patrol patterns but prepare for early extraction. We may be wrapping up sooner than anticipated. Copy, Commander. Any specific threats identified? Jake looked in the direction Sarah had gone, knowing she was probably already miles away despite having disappeared only moments before. Negative. Just a change in mission parameters. As he rejoined his patrol, Jake's mind raced through the implications of what had just happened. Sarah was alive, which meant everything he thought he knew about her disappearance was wrong. She was using an assumed identity, which suggested she was either running from something or working for someone who required deep cover. And she had agreed to meet him, which meant she was either planning to explain everything or planning to disappear again. The tattoo of their coordinates suggested she hadn't forgotten him, but the cold professionalism of her manner suggested she had changed in fundamental ways. The question was whether the woman he met tonight would be Sarah Mitchell, the woman he had loved, or someone else entirely wearing her face. Jake spent the rest of the day going through the motions of his mission while his mind focused on the upcoming meeting. He inventoried his gear, planned his approach to the abandoned warehouse, and tried to prepare for a conversation that could either reunite him with the love of his life or destroy the last shred of hope he had carried for 15 years. As the sun set over the refugee camp, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded him of Sarah's hair in autumn light, Jake realized that in a few hours, he would finally learn the truth about the woman who had vanished from his life. Whatever that truth turned out to be, he knew it would change everything. The coordinates tattooed on her arm had brought them back together, but Jake had no idea whether that reunion would be a blessing or a curse. All he knew was that he would be at that warehouse at 10 o'clock, alone, ready to face whatever answers Sarah Mitchell had to offer. Even if those answers destroyed him. The abandoned warehouse stood like a skeleton against the star-filled Syrian sky, its broken windows staring blindly across the desert landscape. Jake approached the building using every stealth technique his SEAL training had taught him, moving through shadows and using the terrain to mask his approach. Despite Sarah's instruction to come alone, every instinct he possessed screamed that this could be a trap. He had left his team at the forward operating base with instructions to maintain radio silence unless it was an emergency. As far as they knew, their commander was conducting a routine intelligence gathering operation that required radio silence. Jake hated lying to his men, but the truth was too complicated to explain. How could he tell them he was meeting a ghost from his past who might hold the key to questions that had haunted him for 15 years? The warehouse had clearly been abandoned for months, possibly years. Bullet holes in the corrugated metal walls told the story of a firefight, and scorch marks around what had once been the main entrance suggested the building had been targeted at some point during the ongoing conflict. It was exactly the kind of place someone would choose for a clandestine meeting, isolated, easily defended, and with multiple escape routes. Jake circled the building twice before approaching, noting potential sniper positions and checking for signs of recent activity. The dust around the building was undisturbed except for a single set of footprints leading to a side entrance. Small feet, probably a woman's, and the gate suggested someone comfortable moving through hostile territory. At exactly 10 o'clock, Jake slipped through the side door and into the warehouse. The interior was vast and dark, filled with the remnants of whatever business had operated here before the war. Rusted machinery cast strange shadows in the moonlight that filtered through broken skylights, and the air smelled of oil, dust, and neglect. "You're 3 minutes late," came a voice from the shadows. Jake spun toward the sound, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm before stopping himself. Sarah emerged from behind a pile of debris about 20 feet away, and, in the moonlight, she looked like a ghost made real. "I was making sure we weren't followed," Jake said. "By your team or by mine?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Jake studied her face in the dim light, noting the way she held herself in a combat-ready stance despite appearing relaxed. This wasn't the Sarah Mitchell he had known in college. This woman was a professional, someone trained in the same deadly arts that had shaped his own life. "What team?" Jake asked. Sarah smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Still asking the right questions. That's good. It means you haven't gotten sloppy during your 15 years of military service. You've been watching me. I've been watching over you. There's a difference." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "For how long?" "Often, on since you graduated from BUD/S training. More closely during your deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. I made sure I was briefed on every mission that put you in significant danger." "That's impossible." Military intelligence on SEAL operations is classified at the highest levels. No medical volunteer would have access to that information. Sarah's laugh was soft but bitter. "Medical volunteer. Is that what you think I am? I saw you today. You were treating refugees, distributing supplies. Your cover story said you work for International Medical Relief." "Cover story." Sarah repeated the words slowly. "You're starting to understand." Jake felt the ground shifting beneath his feet as pieces of a larger puzzle began to fall into place. "Who do you really work for, Sarah?" "That's classified information, Commander Sullivan. And, before you ask, yes, my clearance level is higher than yours." The casual way she delivered this bombshell hit Jake like a physical blow. Sarah Mitchell, the medical student who had cried during sad movies and spent weekends volunteering at animal shelters, was claiming to be some kind of intelligence operative with security clearance above his own. "I don't believe you," Jake said. Sarah reached into her jacket and pulled out a smartphone. She tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward Jake. The display showed his official military record, including classified mission reports that weren't supposed to exist outside of secure Pentagon databases. Operation Neptune's Thunder, Afghanistan, 2018, Sarah read from the screen. Your team was compromised 48 hours into the mission when insurgents were tipped off about your infiltration route. You took shrapnel from an IED and spent 6 days evading capture while waiting for extraction. Jake's blood ran cold. The details she was reading weren't in any official report because the mission had been classified above top secret. Only 5 people in the world were supposed to know about Operation Neptune's Thunder, and Sarah Mitchell shouldn't be one of them. The intelligence that led to your team being compromised came from a double agent working for Iranian intelligence, Sarah continued. He was eliminated 3 days after your extraction by a sniper using a .338 Lapua round from approximately 800 meters. The sniper was never identified. How do you know this? Because I was the sniper, Jake. I killed the man who nearly got you killed. The warehouse fell silent except for the distant sound of wind through broken windows. Jake stared at the woman he had loved, trying to reconcile the gentle medical student from his memories with someone capable of long-range assassination. You're saying you've been killing people to protect me? Among other things, yes. Sarah, what the hell happened to you? When you disappeared, where did you go? Sarah put away her phone and moved to a broken crate where she sat down, suddenly, looking exhausted. In the moonlight, Jake could see the weight of years and choices in her posture. 3 weeks before your graduation from Northwestern, I was approached by a recruiter, she began. Not the normal kind. CIA, but operating under a program so classified that it doesn't officially exist. They needed medical personnel who could operate in deep cover for extended periods. People with the right psychological profile and no ties that couldn't be severed. What kind of program? Asset protection. High-value intelligence officers, military personnel whose work was crucial to national security, politicians whose survival was deemed essential to American interests. People like you. Jake felt his world tilting on its axis. You're saying the CIA recruited you to be my personal bodyguard? Among others. My cover has been humanitarian work, which gives me access to conflict zones where American personnel operate. I've spent 15 years moving through war zones, treating refugees and civilians while conducting surveillance and elimination operations. And you never thought to tell me? I couldn't. The program requires complete separation from previous identities. Sarah Mitchell had to die so that her cover identity could be born. Contact with former associates was forbidden. Then, why are you telling me now? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up, Jake saw tears in her eyes for the first time since their reunion. Because my cover has been blown. There's a leak in the program, and several of our deep cover operatives have been identified. I have maybe 48 hours before my location is compromised and hostile forces come looking for me. What kind of hostile forces? The kind that specialize in making people disappear permanently. I've been protecting you for 15 years, Jake, but I've also been making enemies. Now those enemies know who I really am. Jake processed this information, his mind racing through the implications. The refugee camp. You weren't there on assignment. I was running. The camp was supposed to be a temporary hiding place while I figured out my next move. And then, I showed up. And then, you showed up. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Do you know what it was like, seeing you again? Knowing that just by being near you, I was putting you in danger? Jake moved closer to her, his anger being replaced by concern. What kind of danger? The people looking for me won't hesitate to kill anyone they perceive as a threat or an asset. If they know I care about you, they'll use you to get to me. Let them try. Jake, You don't understand. These aren't insurgents or enemy soldiers. These are professional killers who specialize in eliminating intelligence assets. They have resources, connections, and capabilities that make your SEAL team look like weekend warriors. Then, we go to ground. Extract you through official channels, bring you in from the cold. Sarah laughed bitterly. There are no official channels for this program. As far as the CIA is concerned, my cover identity is a low-level medical volunteer. My real work doesn't exist in any database or filing cabinet. If I disappear, there's no cavalry coming to rescue me. Jake sat down across from her, his mind working through tactical possibilities. Then, we do this the hard way. You tell me who's hunting you, and I help you eliminate the threat. It's not that simple. Why not? Because the leak in our program came from someone inside the American intelligence community. I don't know who I can trust anymore. The implication hit Jake like a sledgehammer. Sarah wasn't just running from foreign enemies, she was running from her own people. You think someone in the CIA is trying to kill you? I think someone with access to classified information sold out our entire program. 7 operatives have been killed in the past 6 months, all in different parts of the world, all in ways that suggested their covers had been blown. And, you're next on the list. I should have been first. The fact that I'm still alive suggests either incredible luck or that they're saving me for last for some reason. Jake leaned forward. What makes you special compared to the other operatives? I've been in deep cover longer than anyone else in the program. I know things, have seen things that could be embarrassing to certain people in Washington if they ever came to light. What kind of things? Sarah hesitated. Operations that weren't sanctioned. Assassinations that were ordered by people who didn't have the authority to order them. Money that went to places it wasn't supposed to go. You're talking about corruption. I'm talking about a shadow network within the intelligence community that has been using our program to conduct unauthorized operations for their own benefit. And now that network is cleaning house. Jake felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The tattoo. The coordinates. You kept that as a way to remember who you really were. I got the tattoo during my first year in deep cover. I was starting to lose myself, starting to forget who Sarah Mitchell had been before she disappeared. The coordinates were the only thing I had left of my real life. And, you've been carrying a piece of me with you this whole time. Every day for 15 years. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of revelation settling between them. Jake thought about all the times over the years when he had felt like someone was watching over him, the uncanny luck that had kept him alive through impossible situations. Sarah had been there, invisible but present, protecting him from the shadows. What happens now? Jake asked finally. Now you go back to your team and forget you ever saw me. In 24 hours, Sarah Mitchell will disappear again, this time permanently. Like hell. Jake, you have to understand, no, you have to understand. Jake stood up, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years of military command. I lost you once because I didn't know what was happening. I'm not losing you again. You don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Sarah looked up at him, and, in the moonlight, Jake could see the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. Beneath the training and the professional facade and the weight of terrible choices, she was still there. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stop running and start fighting. You want to eliminate the threat against you? Fine. Let's eliminate it. Jake, you don't know what you're saying. I'm saying that I have resources too. I have a team of the most elite warriors in the world, and I have connections throughout the military intelligence community. Between your knowledge and my firepower, we can find whoever betrayed your program and make them pay. It's too dangerous. Everything worth doing is dangerous. Sarah stood up and moved closer to him. In the dim light, Jake could see the conflict playing out across her features. If we do this, there's no going back, she said. Once we start down this path, we're committed. No extraction, no backup plan. I've been committed to you for 15 years, Jake said quietly. That's not going to change now. Sarah reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the scar on his jaw that he had gotten in Fallujah 3 years earlier. You have that scar because I wasn't there to watch your back, she said. And, you have that scar above your eyebrow because you were protecting me from threats I didn't even know existed. How do you know that scar came from protecting you? Because I know you. The Sarah I loved would never let anything happen to me if she could prevent it. Sarah's hand lingered on his face. The Sarah you loved died 15 years ago when she walked away from the best thing that ever happened to her. No, she didn't. She's standing right here. For a moment, Sarah's professional mask slipped completely, and Jake saw 15 years of pain and regret in her eyes. Then, she seemed to make a decision that changed everything. All right, she said. But, we do this my way. We're going up against people who have been playing this game longer than either of us has been alive. One mistake and, we're both dead. Understood. And, Jake? The first rule of this operation is that we trust no one except each other. No military channels, no intelligence contacts, no backup from your command structure. This is off the books in every possible way. Jake nodded. What's the second rule? Sarah smiled, and, for the first time since their reunion, it was the smile he remembered from their college days. The second rule is that we finish this together or we die trying. No walking away, no surrender, no matter what we discover about who betrayed the program. I can live with those rules. I hope so, Sarah said. Because starting tomorrow, we're going to war against an enemy that most people don't even know exists. As they prepared to leave the warehouse, Jake realized that everything about his life was about to change. For 15 years, he had been a warrior fighting visible enemies on foreign battlefields. Now he was about to enter a different kind of war, one fought in shadows against adversaries who hid behind American flags and security clearances. But, for the first time in 15 years, Sarah was going to be fighting beside him instead of protecting him from afar. Whatever dangers lay ahead, they would face them together. The coordinates tattooed on her arm had brought them back together. Now those same coordinates were going to be the starting point for a mission that would either reunite them permanently or destroy them both. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in Istanbul, chosen because the city's massive size and constant flow of international travelers made it easy to disappear. Sarah had established the location 2 years earlier as one of several emergency bolt holes scattered across 3 continents. Jake arrived first, using a combination of military transport and civilian airlines to cover his tracks, officially listed as being on emergency leave following a family crisis. Sarah appeared 12 hours later, looking nothing like the humanitarian worker Jake had encountered in Syria. Her hair was now blonde and, cut in a severe bob, she wore expensive European clothing, and carried herself with the confidence of a successful businesswoman. When she spoke to the landlord in fluent Turkish, her accent was perfect. How many identities do you have? Jake asked once they were alone in the apartment. Active or retired? Sarah was already moving through the space, checking for surveillance devices and escape routes with professional efficiency. Let's start with active. 7 that are fully backstopped with documentation going back 10 years. Maybe a dozen more that would pass casual inspection but wouldn't survive serious investigation. Jake watched her work, impressed despite himself. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, checking angles and sight lines, testing windows and door locks, examining electrical outlets for hidden cameras. This wasn't the Sarah Mitchell he had known, but it was undeniably someone who had survived 15 years in the world's most dangerous places. Clean, she announced finally. But we shouldn't stay here more than 72 hours. That should be enough time to plan our next move. Sarah sat down at a small table and opened a laptop that looked standard but was probably loaded with encryption software and military-grade security protocols. Before we plan anything, you need to understand what we're up against. She typed rapidly, accessing databases that Jake was pretty sure weren't available to the general public. Within minutes, she had pulled up files and photographs that painted a disturbing picture. The program I've been working for is called Nightfall, Sarah began. It was created in 2008 as a response to increased threats against high-value American personnel overseas. The official mission was asset protection through covert surveillance and intervention. Unofficial mission? Whatever certain people in Washington needed done without congressional oversight or public scrutiny. Sarah pulled up a series of photographs showing people Jake didn't recognize. Men and women of various ages and ethnicities, but all sharing a certain professional bearing that suggested military or intelligence backgrounds. These are the Nightfall operatives who have been killed in the past 6 months, Sarah continued. Jennifer Walsh, eliminated in Bangkok. Marcus Rodriguez, killed in Lagos. Emily Chen, found dead in Prague. The list goes on. Jake studied the faces, noting that they all looked like people who could blend into any environment, become anyone they needed to be. How were they killed? Different methods each time, but all showing signs of professional execution. Poison, staged accidents, apparent robberies gone wrong. The kind of deaths that don't immediately scream assassination. But you recognize the pattern. I recognize the pattern because I helped train some of these people. We all knew each other, at least by reputation. When the third operative died within 2 months, I started asking questions. Sarah pulled up another file, this one showing financial records and communication logs that were heavily redacted. That's when I discovered that someone had been accessing our operational files without authorization. Someone with high-level clearance who shouldn't have had any knowledge of Nightfall's existence. Any idea who? Several possibilities, but one name keeps coming up. Sarah's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Deputy Director Marcus Hawthorne, CIA Operations Directorate. Jake recognized the name immediately. Hawthorne was a legend in intelligence circles, a career operative who had worked his way up through the ranks over 30 years. He was also someone Jake had met personally during briefings for several classified operations. Hawthorne has been my handler's handler for the past 5 years, Sarah continued. He's the one who approved most of the unauthorized operations I mentioned earlier. What kind of unauthorized operations? Sarah pulled up a series of mission reports that made Jake's blood run cold. Assassinations of foreign diplomats who were negotiating deals unfavorable to certain American corporations. The elimination of journalists investigating corruption in military contractors. The staged deaths of government officials in allied countries who were asking too many questions about American intelligence activities.